London. No driver.
No driver. It's starting by itself.
Safeway. Oh yes,
specifications and
yes.
plan. So if, for example, say in order to fly a mission, you need a certain site to be eliminated or quietened or something like that.
Yeah.
Is that possible?
No, it doesn't have the sort of, but if you want to fly through a heavily defended enemy area with no air support, that's your view.
Has a Pacific coastline. West Virginia, Wyoming, Washington, Wisconsin. Which of those American states has a Pacific coastline? West Virginia, Wyoming, Washington, Wisconsin. It's worth 16,000, but you drop 7,000 if you give me the wrong answer. I think it's Washington state. Well, lifelines if you want, it's up to you.
Go with Washington. I'm trying to work out which actually.
Take your time, don't hurry, take your time. What are you thinking?
We fly over the Atlantic to America. I'm trying to work out. I'm sure Washington is on the other side, Seattle. Yeah, Washington.
Final answer.
Final answer.
You ever been to Washington?
No.
So that won't help them.
No.
You just won £16,000. You're alright, you're living dangerously, but you've still got 2 lifelines left. You've got £16,000 at the moment. Next one, the next big milestone. If you can give me the right answer to the next one, if you decide to play it, which is up to you, it's worth £32,000. And that would again be the minimum you would leave with here tonight. Have a look at question number 10. It's worth 32,000. You got 16. You can walk away with 16. Here it comes. What's the correct name for a botanical garden devoted to growing trees?
Stand there. What? Stand there all. So, how cold is it?
It's cold, Rob. Windy.
Yeah. I don't know if the zoom's right or not.
Yeah. See loud and clear. Say something.
Castle. it's all upside down.
Careful while I'm taking my picture. Sound much.
Soon to be the site of the former Bundestag.
More and more, I think there were many strokes in her case, and finally they shot, she got.
Ah! Stand down! Hey!
Single clip. You can get two types of and you would have some very friendly Scottish people up the top here, firing their bows and arrows and boiling oil and boiling water coming down on top of them. Well, this is how we used to stop the English centuries ago. Today, we do it by charging them £6.50 entrance fees. This castle has never successfully been captured. Which flies from the palace between fast, and that's the royal symbol of Scotland. Two solid oak doors which they had to break down, and then his very vicious spike portcullis behind. When we get to you, hold on to your hats.
He's walking in the heart.
As we make our way towards it, the locals are walking along a little central FORH. And in Scotland, when we have an estuary or an inlet, it's called a firth. F-I-R. So that's the firth of Forth. And on the other side of the river, the region is called Fife. So I'm going to teach you a little tongue twister. You can all try and say fresh Fife fish from the Firth of Forth. Fresh Fife fish from the Firth of Forth. Try it after a couple of whiskies tonight. Now we're making our way towards the last gateway, which will take us into the citadel. It's called the 1 o'clock gun. You can use it to have a quarrel at 1 o'clock. What happens is, on the far side of the city, there's a hillside and a tower. And just before 1 o'clock, a white ball is taken to the top of the tower. Exactly 1 o'clock, the ball is dropped, the cannon is fired. When the ships were all built in the river, the ship's captains checked the chronometers at exactly 1 o'clock. So you can see how difficult it will be to travel. Because it's the oldest building in the city. It's called St. Martin's. Very well loved, very religious lady, Mary King of Scotland. If any of you remember, he was a man who wanted Macbeth killed. So it gives you an idea of the time scale of when this little building was constructed. When Queen Margaret died, her sons wanted a chapel built to commemorate her life. We know she died in the castle in 1093. So within a few years of that date. So we're talking over 900 years old, the oldest building in the city. Please go inside because it's still a There's an amazing ceiling inside called the hammer beam ceiling, entirely made of wood, no metal in its construction. There's a little doorway just in the far right-hand corner with the date of 1566 above it. These are the main royal halls. They've just been restored over the past few months. Absolutely superb inside. Go through the main room and find a with the far right-hand corner. It's very important because this is where Mary, Queen of Scots, gave birth to her son, who was called James. James VI of Scotland, who later went on to become James I of England.
What
You're too close to it, you can tell. That's good, that's fine, it's come back here. Straight up, geese, straight up.
You all visitors to Edinburgh? Have you ever been in a Camera Obscura before? No. Does anyone know what what the two words Camera Obscura means? It comes from two Latin words meaning a darkened room, which appears self-evident. But think of this like a giant camera, only with the light coming in through the roof. On the roof, there's a mechanism which includes a mirror about this size held at an angle. So the light coming from the side is reflected, bounced downwards through a series of lenses you can just see up in the ceiling, onto this plain wooden table, painted white to get a good reflection, and hollowed out into a concave shape to help focus the image. With this apparatus, I can move the mirror up or down, or left or right, into a complete circle. It's the same principle as a periscope, only with the light projected onto a surface rather than onto someone's eyes. It also means that in the course of the presentation, the picture will move in an anti-clockwise direction, so wherever you are, it will be upright at least one time. It's also reflected light, which means that it's not as strong as light you might see outside. I mean, there was one man who tried to video this, and unfortunately all he got was about 20 minutes of a blank white table because the light wasn't strong enough. This has been here since 1853, when Maria Theresa Short, who was an optician, had this building, the Outlook Tower, constructed, so that the Camera Obscura we're standing in will be high up, and being in the middle of Edinburgh would have excellent views in all directions. That means it's nearly 150 years old. When it was opened, people didn't have access to the internet, video, television or cinema. Even photography was in its infancy. So for people of that time to come in here and look on this table and see other people moving around in living colour was regarded as extraordinary. Some people said it was witchcraft. Other people said it was naughty because we were spying on people without their permission. The important thing is that this will give you a tour of Edinburgh without you leaving the room, and it will now begin. Here we have Edinburgh Castle. Have you all been able to visit Edinburgh Castle? This has been described as one of the most important group of buildings in Britain. This has been a place of importance for residents of kings, queens, chiefs and warriors for over 2,000 years, one of the longest recorded periods of continuous importance in the world. Although the gatehouse here is only about 100 years old, this was built back then to provide a nice imposing entrance to the castle. This is the original entrance back here. This little building up here, on the other hand, Queen Margaret's Chapel, is over 850 years old and is the oldest building in Edinburgh Castle and in Edinburgh. The palace block here is about 600 years old, and it's in here that the crown jewels, the honours of the realm of Scotland, are kept. There used to be a big tower here about 200 feet high that was called David's Tower, because it was built about 600 years ago by David II, one of the kings of Robert the Bruce, one of the sons of Robert the Bruce, I beg your pardon. but that was completely destroyed in a siege about 200 years later, and the Half Moon Battery here was built out of the rubble. The open space in front is the Esplanade, best known as the location of the Tattoo, that military parade and pageant that takes place during the Edinburgh Festival. Originally this was simply open ground between the castle and town, where soldiers from the castle garrison were drilled and paraded at various times. On one occasion, about 200 years ago, one man was actually blown off the edge by a sudden gust of wind. Miraculously, he wasn't killed. But after that, the area was carefully levelled out with rubble from demolished buildings, and these sheltering walls are also constructed to make it safer. Now, if you're walking across Edinburgh, the Esplanade, you may feel slightly queasy, as if someone's lifting you up, tossing you around and dropping you. Lifting you up and dropping you. Well, don't worry, it's just us up here. Would anyone like to try it? Please come down.
Can you get a step go through it?
There you are. There's a piece of paper.
To the bus. The bus. The people. Some people there.
Me too, one.
Is it? The people.
Thank you. Of course, the ball of your hand, and if you're feeling malevolent. But I digress. And now we move on the tour. We move to the southwest of the castle, to the part of Edinburgh known as Fountainbridge, after its very good springs of water. Here in Fountainbridge you have the McEwan Breweries, one of the largest breweries in Scotland, and the source of that sweet malty smell you may have noticed in the air. Fountainbridge is also celebrated for being the birthplace of Sir Sean Connery. Yes, the original 007, shaken not stirred, came into the world there. His first job, though, was as a milk delivery boy, a job he soon got tired of. He felt there must be more to life, and so he took acting lessons. In order to pay for these acting lessons, he did various odd jobs. He polished coffins, and he worked here in the Edinburgh College of Art. But he didn't paint, draw or sculpt there. He posed as a life model, wearing nothing but a smile. In the background you have the Pentland Hills, about 6-7 miles south of here, a good place for hikes and obtaining views of Edinburgh. Actually, one of the largest artificial ski slopes in Europe is up here on the Pentland Hills, but it's obscured by this large chimney. You can see it if you go out onto the open space. Talking of hills, you may have read in various books or pamphlets that Edinburgh is built on 7 hills. In fact, it's built on 12. And here are 2 of them. The Braid Hills, with 1 radio mast on top, and Blackford Hill, with another radio mast. The white building here with the aforementioned chimney is part of the Royal Infirmary of Edinburgh, one of the oldest and most extensive hospitals in Scotland, stretching all the way from here, through here, along here, for money left by George Heriot, who was the royal goldsmith. A very wealthy man, but very disappointed in that he had no children of his own, so he left every penny in his will for the construction of an orphanage. Although times have changed, and now this is one of Edinburgh's leading fee-paying schools. Just before this was completed, it was occupied by Oliver Cromwell during the Civil War. He used it as his headquarters when he was besieging Edinburgh Castle, so if you'd looked down there at that time, you would have seen cannon aimed up at you. Rather dangerous. More peaceful are the buildings from here over to here. Edinburgh University, the 4th oldest university in Scotland and the oldest in Edinburgh. The building with the dome is the McEwan Hall, built about 140 years ago from money left by the McEwan family who owned the brewery we saw earlier. But this isn't a place for drinking, this is a place for graduation ceremonies, concerts and various university functions. It's also connected to Edinburgh Medical School, for which the university is celebrated. The roof here is of Greyfriars Kirk or Church, famous for its association with Greyfriars Bobby. There's the National Museum of Scotland. This was opened about just over a year ago, and it displays Scotland's history from earliest times to the present day through a fascinating collection of objects, including a complete railway engine. Well worth a visit, although if you're going, give yourself at least half a day. There's a lot to see. Here we have another of Edinburgh's hills, Arthur's Seat, named after the legendary King Arthur. This used to be a royal hunting estate, but now it's a place for walks, picnics in the summer, and for obtaining good views of Edinburgh. And if you're up here, I can promise you one thing, we can't see you because of this. The tower of what used to be St John's Highland Kirk with a toll booth, built about 160 years ago, it now houses the hub and centre of information on the Edinburgh Festival, which is a very good, where there's a rather good cafe and shops where you can buy books or records. The spire is still the highest artificial structure in Edinburgh. The top is even higher than the castle. Here's Whinny Hill beside Arthur's Seat. And now we come to that street which for centuries was Edinburgh. The Royal Mile, so called because this street stretches in a Scottish mile, 1 1/8 of an English mile, all the way from the Royal Castle down to the Royal Palace at Holyrood here. The main street of Edinburgh has on it the main church, St Giles High Kirk, with its famous crown spire. Traffic can sometimes be a bit of a problem here on the Royal Mile, so sometimes it's necessary to have traffic calming methods such as a new bridge. It means you put your hand under the traffic without getting run over. Now, because the Royal Mile runs along the crest of a ridge with steep sides, it was a good place to live during the endless wars between England and Scotland in the Middle Ages. Secure but cramped, because we're anything up to 50,000 people living around the Royal Mile at one time. And since people couldn't build out, they had to build up. And there were buildings of 12 or 13 floors constructed here. Rickety, cramped, prone to collapsing and burning down, and very squalid. I mean, if you had rubbish you wanted to get rid of, you had to throw it onto the street and hope the next rainstorm would wash it away, out of your sight and usually into someone else's sight. So there's a lot of disease around Edinburgh. It's often said skyscrapers were invented in Edinburgh. I mean, here you can see a building of nearly 8 floors, and this was built over 200 years ago. Here we have yet another of Edinburgh's hills, Calton Hill. Now you might think the building on top looks an awful lot like a giant upturned telescope. Well, that's deliberate. This is the Nelson Memorial, built about 200 years ago in honour of Admiral Lord Nelson. The structure behind is officially called the National Memorial because this was built shortly afterwards in honour of Admiral Lord Nelson, in honour of those Scots who had been killed in the Napoleonic Wars. The official plan had been to erect a replica of the Parthenon in Athens here, but the money ran out and they could only afford 12 pillars, so the structure is known more usually as Edinburgh's Disgrace. The building with the green dome is the Bank of Scotland, founded about 300 years ago. And now we come to the New Balmoral Hotel. Now, if you've been walking along Princess Street and looked up at the clock there to check your time, you may have been surprised to see it's wrong. It's 3 minutes fast. But that's not because the mechanism is wonky, it's deliberate. The idea is that if you're hurrying to your train in Waverley Station down in the hollow here, and you follow the time on that clock, then you'll be early or on time for your train. Correct the clock, though, is on Hogmanay, so the people of Edinburgh don't celebrate New Year's Day twice. And now we come to the new town. This is so cool because this was built about 250 years ago, while the old town has been around for over 800 years. This came into being because of peace between England and Scotland and a desire to build a whole new town away from the squalid and cramped old town. A competition was held and was won by a young architect called James Craig. His plan was to have 3 parallel streets, Princess Street, George Street and Queen Street. The buildings between the streets were about 3 floors in height, like this building left behind here, although of course Princess Street has changed a great deal since then. The spire-like structure is the Scott Monument, built about 170 years ago in honour of Sir Walter Scott, one of Scotland's best-known writers. Out in the back you can just make out the waters of the Firth of Forth, that part of the North Sea which nearly divides Scotland in half. And that's because this building around here, where you can see these cranes, is strictly speaking not Edinburgh but the port of Leith, which used to be an independent town until it was absorbed by Edinburgh about 70 years ago. The 2 towers here are of the Assembly Hall and Church of Scotland, which is next door and is also the temporary home for the new Scottish Parliament. Of the Firth of Forth, you can just make out the land of the Kingdom of Fife. Strictly speaking, this is the county of Fife, but it's known as the Kingdom because about 1,000 years ago, during the time of the Picts, this was an independent kingdom and the name has stuck. And now we come to the Mound, that sloping road running from the old town down to the new. Beside it, you see the National Gallery of Scotland, open most days of the year, and the Royal Scottish Academy, only open for specific exhibitions. The open space here is Princess Street Gardens. Originally this was a marshy hollow that was dammed about 500-600 years ago to form a body of water that became known as the Nor Loch, or North Lake, intended to defend the old town against attack from the north. Unfortunately, all the rubbish washed down from the old town ended up in here, So it became little better than an open sewer. And it was also the place where witches were tried between 450 and 300 years ago. At that time, if someone was accused of being a witch, they weren't tried in a court. They were dragged down to the shores of the loch, their thumbs and their toes were tied together, and they were thrown in, twice. If they floated, it was taken as a sign the devil was helping them, and therefore they were guilty. So they were hauled out, dragged up near the castle, and burnt at the stake. If they sank, on the other hand, it was taken as a sign the devil was not helping them, and they were innocent. Unfortunately, that usually tended to mean they drowned, rather than a no-win situation. The lake was drained about 250 years ago, and when the new town was built, this became the private gardens of the people living on Princes Street. When Princes Street became more shops than houses, the gardens were open to the public, and have remained so ever since. I'm afraid we can't adjust the picture here. What you see here is all the light that can be reflected on that mirror. The gasometers there are of New Haven, which used to be another independent port that was absorbed into Edinburgh. The trees here are of Charlotte Square. Have any of you visited Charlotte Square? It's well worth a visit. It's said to be the finest Georgian architecture, not just in Edinburgh, possibly in Scotland. It's often